is there to spot. Really nothing much else to say. JangBi has already put some Dragoons in position to try to pick off those forces. Does observe his sensitive base as well. Forge coming up as well for Pusan, so he's taking up on all sides. Going to continue constant Dragoon production. Doesn't have as many Zealots on the ground, but he is going to have more. Just now, range upgrade going for JangBi. And Pusan did have possibly a little bit of chance to possibly do some harassment just to take advantage of his goon range. He was attempting to do that, but just that bridge positioning, allowing JangBi to hold his natural expansion very simply, very easily. Not allowing Pusan to try to do some sort of damage to his army just because of that. He did not want to force full-on attack just to possibly lose a lot of his Dragoons. So actually smart in that. Is actually now going to move out with his shuttle. Attempt to do some sort of harassment. There are observers all over the place, and JangBi does know this is coming, so might actually do a lot of damage. Pusan actually going to move with 4 Dragoons. They're from the back. Gonna spot a probe that was possibly thinking of putting down a mineral only. That's gonna get taken out. Just gonna try to spot any sort of possible scouting position. We're gonna see the shuttle actually coming in. That might. Oh, there's one single Dragoon there to possibly take care of that one single shell that is going to do some damage, but Dreaver's going to come down. Scarab. Far too late. Scarab not going to be able. Oh, dot Scarab on that. The shuttle, meanwhile, going down. So JangBi going to take out the Reaver and the shuttle. Terrible damage done there to Pusan. Interestingly enough, two of his Dragoons managed to stay alive despite the huge grouping of force. JangBi, smartly enough, mining out the minerals behind his main just to allow himself more troop position, just to make sure those attacks don't happen. Observers on the field actually going to get taken out by Pusan. Is going to attempt to stick to this slight contain he has with those Dragoons, but not actually going to be. It's not going to be allowed for too long. Temple Archives already on the ground also for JangBi, so he might have actually deviated and not gone for robotic support. I don't even know if I saw robotic support from both players. Actually have Temple Archives at this point, so this is actually sticking from early possible Reaver, which JangBi actually decided to default on just to. He knew that it was Reaver's harassment coming in. He knew he could have prevented. He knew he did. Now he just gets some Templars out and continue this up. Pusan actually has his own Templars just to start storming, so we might be seeing a bunch of, few Zealots, bunch of goons, some storms all over the place. And when it comes to storms, you don't want to be facing up against JangBi because his storms are as close to immaculate as you're gonna get. If JangBi does not have immaculate storm, then who the hell does have great storms? Just tell me that. JangBi moving out of his early contained position, milling down southwards with a lot of Dragoons, actually going to pass the middle bridges. Meanwhile, Pusan going to attempt to take a third, while JangBi going to take a mineral only at the upper right-hand position. So that third gas might help Pusan if he decides to go for heavy Templar and possibly even Archon. But that third base is going to be very vulnerable, going to give himself very open. So if JangBi goes in there, takes that base out, goes with all of his forces right in that base, goes in there, takes it out, holds the ramp, Pusan's going to be in a horrible position, really. Just going to continue moving around, going to pick off some observers that were scouting for him. There's going to be a slight meeting of forces there, but both players probably not really feeling it, not wanting to protect there. And I'm not even sure if JangBi knows that Pusan has taken his third. Actually, an Archon on the field for JangBi, so he's actually not going to resort to storms. We're going to see what happens here. There's going to be a first engagement. JangBi going to get a slight surround from the left side. There are going to be some storms coming in, hitting a decent number of Dragoons. Pusan with some nice storms, also moving in with Zealot to try to block off another storm, hitting a lot of Dragoons and a Zealot there alongside. Pusan, meanwhile, just pushing all the forces back with his Zealots as he tries to shoot it with his Dragoons from the range. Going to pick off the High Templar. Still going to keep his Templars alive. Both of them still alive. Storming yet again. Going to morph him into an Archon right there as he continues to try to hold JangBi back. JangBi, meanwhile, just far too many Dragoons despite the beautiful storming, but is in fact going to pull back at the very end. Pull back right at the very end. So fairly even battle there. Honestly, Pusan did have fewer forces, but his storm managed to sort of rescue him at the end there a little bit. Did do damage some of those forces a lot, and I think he actually pushed with those Zealots maybe a little bit too far ahead, to the point that Dragoons were being forced to not being able to support those Zealots. Zealots were just pushing some of the Dragoons, holding them back from coming into the fight while he was engaging a smaller Dragoon number with his own Dragoons. So honestly, I don't think really anybody came ahead all in all. JangBi at this point actually producing a lot of Zealots, very heavy Zealot army. Most likely just because of those heavy storms that his opponent's going for, because he knows if he has a lot of those zealots, actually going to be able to take some more of those swords, going to be able to dodge them a little bit. Actually going to mill right towards the bridges, and we're going to see this Pusan is exactly what he wants. He has a lot of zealots just holding the forces of JangBi back just on that bridge, going to be able to hold that bridge towards his third base, going to be able to keep his positioning up, and this is actually going to be a very heavy macro protoss game. We're going to see what this involves into. Not really expecting any sort of arbiter antics on this thing, honestly, now that I think about it. We never know what's going to happen. Third guy's going to come up for Pusan just now, while JangBi just going to stick to his mineral only at the left hand. We're going to see Pusan is going to take his mineral only at the lower left hand, so we're going to see some of his somewhat aggressive base taking. While JangBi, I think, is actually taking his third gas at the 2 o'clock position. Both players just milling around with forces. Both players just, of course, just keeping their forces in one large ball, just positioning and repositioning and positioning and repositioning just outside the bridges. And I think at this point, neither player wants to be caught on the bridges, wants to be caught crossing the bridges, and be caught in a pretty bad position while doing so. He has to be really careful. Going to pick off a scouting probe. JangBi going to move a little bit south. We're going to at least try to catch a Dragoon off the ground, while Pusan's actually going to move towards this new base. JangBi attempting to put up. See, being caught on the bridge, not being able to mill out all of his forces. Final action going to come up. Just as base comes up, High Templar's like a little bit from behind, gonna get some storms off on a oh man, storms freaking everywhere. Dragoons melting. Someone JangBi losing a lot of Dragoons. All those High Templar with a lot of energy to spare. Gonna morph a lot of them into Archons. At least someone should actually be able to manage to become Archons. A lot of Dragoons also on the field. Even more storms coming in. And Pusan actually not going to be allowed 2 of his Archons, but still have some Dragoons on the field. Not going to be able to prevent this base from taking up, but at least do a lot of troop damage. Finally, JangBi has his own storms on the field, going to be able to finish off the last of these forces. Pusan coming in with reinforcements right now. Dragoons does have one more High Templar on the field as well, but I think JangBi is still going to be able to hold this. Does have that one single Archon to tank for those Dragoons of his, and alongside those 2 High Templar, which are going to be able to hold him at bay. JangBi sending in a lot of Zealot reinforcements just to attempt to push all those Dragoon-heavy army of Pusan's back, and decided not to stick too heavily on the Archons. Finally getting some High Templars on the field. His main emptying pretty heavily at this point. His natural expansion mining, his mineral oil mining, and his new base should be mining. So both players are at this point fairly even in bases. The only thing that Pusan has had is third gas for just a itty bit longer. So he's been able to produce a little bit more heavy on the High Templars, I suppose. Actually going to morph some into Archons at this point, knowing that they have a pretty nice heavy tanking capability, especially since JangBi is going very heavy on the Zealots. So getting those splash damage hits is actually very useful for him. But at this point, it's all army against army. Not really much economic damage done since the early stages of the game. Pusan, interestingly enough, has a probe at the 10 o'clock position, so he's actually going to spot JangBi attempting to take that base. We're going to see what actually decides to rush towards that, or actually attempt to take his own 5th in response to this. The base is going to come up. A little bit of probe battle happening there, which Pusan unfortunately lost. Let's see, Pusan thinking of milling his forces towards that 2 o'clock position, but knows that he could possibly get caught in the bridge. Going to get caught with his rear guard in a pretty bad position. So actually going to push back a little bit, take a couple pot shots at some of the Zealots crossing those bridges. Both players have an army composition very much alike, although I think JangBi is definitely a little bit more Zealot heavy than Pusan. Pusan was a little bit more Dragoon heavy. And actually, I think JangBi is doing this just simply for the fact that he saw all those storms, saw that Pusan was focusing very heavy on the storms, so he's actually going to be able to prevent that from being as useful as it was before. But now, there's going to be another attack. Pusan's going to come in, going to get some of his forces stormed right now, going to get some of his own storms off. Some of his Dragoon stormed very heavily. Storms all over the place for JangBi now. And his storms hitting every single target on the frickin' field.